designed to encourage, empower, and educate real estate professionals by sharing best practices from business leaders that are proven winners. I'm your host, Kyle Malnati, and this is Calibrate Real Estate. Broadcasting from the Mile High City, thank you for tuning in to the Calibrate Real Estate podcast. We're here for real estate professionals, and you know that we're designed to encourage, empower, and educate you. This episode is number 40. It's been a really cool ride as we've gone from recording a podcast episode twice a week to now once a week. We launch every Friday, and I'm sure for all of you subscribers out there, you know that already. But if you're new to the podcast, we just want to say thank you, and you can expect that you're going to see a notification in Apple iTunes every Friday when we launch a new episode. Our podcast producer, Kayla Davis, and I are working hard to give you guys great content, and today is going to be a fun episode. Amanda DiVito-Parle lives here in Colorado. She's become a very good friend of mine. We're in a mastermind group that meets once a month. And Amanda, you might recall, if you've listened to some of our older episodes, was the host of episode 19, which was called the Working Mom Panel. She led that panel as the moderator for the panel, and she did a great job. She is a working mom. She and her husband, Ryan, have 3 kiddos, Evelyn, Nolan, and Oliver, and they live in Arvada, Colorado. Amanda is a powerhouse broker with RE/MAX Alliance. Her team is called the DiVito Dreammakers. DiVito is her maiden name. And her dad, Joe DiVito, started that business, that team at RE/MAX Alliance decades ago. And Amanda took over for Joe. And you'll hear that in our interview. Amanda and I were just on the phone actually the other day as we were talking, and she was coming off of a plane at Denver International Airport with a couple of friends of mine that I know, mutual friends of ours, from the Elite Retreat for RE/MAX, which means that to be invited to the Elite Retreat, you have to have closed over $500,000 in gross commission income, which is amazing. And for those of you that have heard some of our other podcasts, Amanda actually introduced me to Sean Modry, who is episode 30, and that's one of our most popular podcasts. So Amanda's a very well-connected person. She was a 30 under 30, like a lot of our guests are, and that was Realtor Magazine in the class of 2008. And her team, besides that GCI number I shared with you, is doing a lot of transactions for folks in the northwest suburbs of Denver metro area. They do about 140 sides a year. And I'm so excited to introduce you to Amanda. Before we do that, Amanda and I talked at length about a concept of how we came up with the name Calibrate Real Estate for our brokerage firm, as well as for the podcast. And I've heard the word calibrate several times over the past couple of years, but when I was pondering starting the company between 2015 and 2016, I got to see Jim Collins, an amazing author and speaker, speak at an event called the EntreLeadership Summit in Dallas, Texas. And Jim outlined a concept that is called Fire Bullets, Then Cannonballs, which is from his book, Great by Choice. Now, Jim is probably known the best from his book, Good to Great. And Great by Choice was one of his other books in that series. And Jim is a researcher. He started at Stanford University and now lives in Boulder, Colorado. So he's local here to folks from Colorado. And Jim's Fire Bullets, Then Cannonballs concept is one of the things that really stuck with me about the word calibrate. So he says in this concept that first you fire bullets, these low cost, low risk, low distraction experiments to figure out what will work, calibrating your line of sight by taking small shots. Then you have empirical validation. Like I said, Jim is pretty heady. He's a researcher. You have empirical validation to fire a cannonball, concentrating your resources into a big bet on that calibrated line of sight. Calibrated cannonballs correlate with outsized results. Uncalibrated cannonballs correlate with disaster. The ability to turn small proven ideas, bullets, into huge hits, cannonballs, counts more than the sheer amount of pure innovation. So what Jim was talking about here in the speech that I saw was that a lot of companies get great credit for being big innovators. And the reality is most companies actually do a lot of small testing. They do a lot of small trial and error before they actually prove a concept, and then they bet big on it. And the story that Jim shares, I love it, and I'll share it with you here, is picture a naval scene. Picture ships on the sea, and you've got a hostile ship bearing down on you. You've got a limited amount of gunpowder. And one way of looking at it is you take all your gunpowder and you use it to fire a big cannonball at that enemy ship that's approaching quickly. The cannonball flies over the ocean and misses the target, off by about 40 degrees. You turn to your stockpile and you discover that you're out of gunpowder. You die. And that's what happens if you fire all of your resources at something, just basically thinking about your gut feelings or some bet, basically. Now, suppose in the second way of looking at this, instead, what you see is the ship bearing down on you, and you take a bit of gunpowder and you fire it in your smaller guns. You fire a bullet. It misses by that 40 degrees, but you take another bullet and you fire it. Now it misses by 30 degrees. You make a third bullet and fire, missing only by 10 degrees. You're getting closer and closer. The next bullet hits, ping. You hear the hull of the ship, that enemy ship, get hit. Now you have a calibrated line of sight. You take the remaining gunpowder, pack your cannon with a cannonball, and fire, sinking that other ship on that calibrated line of sight. So Jim described this in 2016 at an event that I was at, and I thought about it. I'm like, I calibrate. I learn by trial and error, and once you've developed something, once you develop a system, then you make that big bet and pour all your resources into it. So that was something Amanda and I were talking about before this recording started, and I wanted to share that concept with you. Check out Jim Collins' book, Great by Choice. Fabulous read. Any of Jim's books are amazing. I've read several of them. Good to Great, How the Mighty Fall. He just is a great author. So enjoy this episode with Amanda DiVito-Parle, episode 40. If you've got questions, comments, please write us a review. We'd love a 5-star review on Apple iTunes. Please subscribe to the podcast on Apple, iTunes, and YouTube. And as I love to say, thank you so much for tuning in to the Calibrate Real Estate Podcast. We will see you around the neighborhood. Have fun, everybody. Bye.
So let's dive in, if you don't mind. So one of the things, before I started writing this book, one of the things that I found really difficult in my younger years, before 30 under 30, and really before where I am today, is I found that I would personally wear my failures, almost like I'd take them personally. I'd almost take like a client that hung up on me if I was making a cold call or a prospecting call, like they don't like me. Well, the reality is it's not that they don't like me. Maybe they're hungry and they haven't eaten lunch yet. Maybe their spouse just yelled at them or something. But I think what happens is when people make mistakes, a certain group of people kind of wear that failure personally, while others, more successful people like yourself, I think have learned how to manage failure. And so how did you learn how to handle or manage failure differently than maybe the masses?
Well, it's funny. I have a note written down that's different than what just came to my mind, but it's anecdotally, I remember my experience working in retail at the Gap in college. And anybody who's ever, I always say any good salesperson should have either worked in the restaurant industry or in the retail business at some time in their life.
I did both.
Because when you're on the other side of the register, what you realize is that, and I think I learned this at that time, was that, everybody has their own interesting shit, right? And so you just don't know what's going on in their day today that would lead them to behave or treat you one way or another.
Absolutely.
And so I just started to discover that, happiness is an inside job. And I learned in college that on the other side of that cash register, if those people weren't happy, that was on them. And I learned a long time ago to sort of not carry other people's monkeys and to let other people, deal with their own interesting shit, because I didn't have the capacity for theirs too,
Right.
And so I think the other way of saying that is that my dad, when I joined him in the business 13 years ago, my dad said, you have to learn, remember when you were little and I taught you how to flush the toilet? Now that you're big, I'm going to teach you how to flush again. And so my dad calls it flushing or the sloughing, and that is just to not let other people's interesting shit compile, and that you have to just learn to slough a little bit here. And so the question is about, making mistakes and failure. My notes here was just that, being a prepared person, I think actually ultimately sets you up to fail less. And so I find that this translates in my work, and it translates in my home life, and it translates in my personal life. And being a prepared person, I think, transcends, being a happy person too, which is, if I have to get 3 kids out the door in the morning, if I have all 11 bags lined up at the back door the night before, getting out the door in the morning is easy. The failure on that is I don't have the bags lined up, I don't have the bottles made, and I don't have the boots in the bag. That's my own problem. If something gets missed, that I learned as a new mom. But that also translated into my business, which is the phone rings and I didn't have a consultation package together. And it would take me double the time to get out the door to go take a listing or go take a new buyer if I didn't have the package prepared. So in my business, I keep really tight systems. I do the same things over and over again. In fact, I find myself saying the same things over and over again to my clients, and really just being almost honing my script, or finding those scripts early in your career that work for you, and then being able to almost just recite them. So just preparedness in life, I think, is such a huge piece of success in business. Information sets us up better to avoid mistakes. And what I mean by that is, when I consult with a client and I give them all the information they need, I tell them that in any situation, being given all the information you need, you're going to make good decisions. And so if I give them a market analysis and I tell them their house is worth $459,000 and we get an offer for $459,000, then I've done my job. They had good information and everybody was prepared in spite of the fact that they may have been on the market for $475,000. And so as long as I think you're giving people good information and being prepared when you show up to do it, you can avoid failure. Listen, we've all failed, right? And I'm trying to think of some specific examples in my business where I've done that. My big mouth has gotten me in trouble a lot, and I'm a talker, I'm a people person, I'm a social creature, but occasionally you jump to conclusions or you judge too quickly, and that stuff can get you. And so just being careful to, try to be a listener to your clients, even if you are a social creature or an extrovert, and maybe that'll avoid some pain or misery down the road if you're too quick to get ahead of yourself. And I think those are probably the areas I've made mistakes.
Yeah, and I've made those mistakes too. I completely agree with you. Being kind of that high I personality that I am, I speak before I think at times, and sometimes that serves me very well. Other times I get my big foot in my mouth, and then sometimes I find that I ask questions, and I ask questions with assumptions behind them.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the big things I'm working through right now as I'm leading a team, and that'll be our next question is, when I'm leading others, sometimes I ask questions assuming the answer. And the best advice I got was just a few months ago at Tupper Briggs, his mastermind that he hosted for us. He had used, and I'm going to maybe not get it perfect, but he had used this concept of ask questions from a sincere place.
A place of curiosity, he said.
Place of curiosity, exactly. Instead of a place of assumption.
Of judgment, yeah.
Of judgment, yep, exactly. And so when I heard that, I was like, yes. And I totally know when I'm not asking a question from a place of curiosity.
It's the only thing I wrote down from that meeting.
Oh, really?
I wrote a few things down, but that was my other big takeaway from that meeting too.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So that leads me into our next question, is that I think for 30 under 30s, and specifically for young realtors, most of us, I started off on a team, you started off on a team, you get to a point where you become successful enough that you're like, well, where's my role on the team? Am I going to become the team leader?
Yeah.
Or if you came from kind of that lone wolf or lone ranger type of application, which I think a lot of people also come from, at what point do you realize, and I realized this, that you need others around you to help you to succeed? And then I think oftentimes, like a parent, and you use the parenting example already, but as a parent, I've often found, and I find this way in real estate as well, it's hard to let others fail around you. And so do you have any tips on that? Have you mastered the art of being able to allow others to fail when you knew that that's what it took for you to get to where you are today?
Having good, I mean, I think having good business systems, having good business systems has helped me set my team in the right direction. So when I've brought people on, I really tried to get them sort of at least on the tracks.
Mm-hmm.
And then really their success and failure isn't, and I jokingly tell people, your success and failure is entirely up to you. And the buyer's agents I have working for me and the people that are working here on my team, their success is entirely up to them. And I don't hold my business partners to any production accountability, and I don't hold them to any sales volume or income accountability. We do.
That's interesting. And I know I'm interrupting you, but could you maybe expand on, because I don't either. We have a team goal, but I don't write a goal down and say, you've got to hit that or you're fired from a productivity. Right. So why do you do
my team goal is derived of their personal goals. So once everybody has set their personal goals, we put it together.
Okay.
And so, but the reason for that is that you're not going to make somebody do something they won't, and you're not going to make somebody be somebody they're not. And so I'm a high I, I'm a driver, I'm a D, I get it. Not everybody is like me, and not everybody, unlike me, wants to work with somebody or be on the team with somebody like me. And so in some ways, I've actually surrounded myself with different personality types, and I just understand, or I came to understand that they're not like me. They don't tick the same way. And so, so I just can't expect them to do the same production or to work the same kind of hours or to grind the same grind. I mean, they're just not going to. And so, so ultimately I never tie my success or my numbers, my business's numbers or my income goals to somebody else's success. And I think a lot of teams get caught up doing that, where the team lead or the rainmaker is saying, well, I'm going to give you all my leads and I'm not going to do any production because I'm going to be so busy being a rainmaker. And then they're so disappointed when somebody who isn't like them, doesn't tick like them, and doesn't work like them didn't get the business done. And it's the old adage, if you want something done, do it right, do it yourself. If you want something done right, do it yourself. And so for my team, what's more important to me is just for them to set their goals and then for me to sort of help support them in those. And we do that two ways. We do a yearly retreat, which actually just occurred yesterday. And at the retreat, we basically uncover every rock. We look at all of our business systems. I have a 9-page document that I year over year, and it's a moving document. We add things to it and take things away. But it's everything you can conceive of that we do in the business. Things from making daily prospect calls to new clients, making daily prospect calls to existing clients, things like the filing systems and the phones and our accountant and the QuickBooks and the payroll service and DMAR, our local realtor association, and everything else, everything we do in our business is sort of listed on here, and we turn over all those rocks. We rank them from 1 to 10, and we figure out where we're coming up short in that area of our business, and we discuss those at the retreat. So that's a way for us to sort of identify any of our weak spots and then correct them right away. We do that twice a year. We do it at a mid-year retreat in July as well. And then at that meeting, I usually do some kind of team building or some kind of consultation. So in this particular meeting, we did a social media SEO person came, did a little consult with the team, talked about where we need to be, for the millennials in Facebook and Instagram, and how we need to be connecting with these people on Zillow and so forth. And so we did that yesterday. We also brought in a marketing expert, Amy Miller Marketing, who is a dear friend of ours, came and did a consultation on how we're spending our marketing dollars and if it's working. So she evaluated my entire marketing budget, basically looked at that and said, here's where the DeVito Dreammakers are spending money. Is it working? In years past, I've done things like disc profiling, having experts come in who can sort of consult on that. I've had my real estate coach came and did a retreat for us at one time, and she did a group analysis to figure out different personality types and so forth. I think when you're doing all of that kind of stuff, that planning, that working in your business and not working on your business and not working in your business kind of stuff, then it sort of sets the tone for the year. We all did our goal setting each year for as long as my dad's been in business. We actually set goals and we write them down. We put them on a little coin and we carry the coin with us. And the coin will say 50 real estate sides personally, 115 real estate sides for the team, or whatever your goals are. and 45 million in sales, or whatever the number ends up being. And so I put this engraved on the coin, it goes on my keys, and it goes with me everywhere I go.
Wow.
And so the coin, have I never showed you our coin?
No, that's fascinating, and I love it.
Yeah, and I'll show it to you, and I'll even bring you one. But so I make the team put all their goals down in writing and carry it with them on their keychain or in their pocket. And that's really the extent of the accountability. We have weekly meetings with the staff, where the team basically just continues to refine those weak spots in our yearly agenda. And we turn over all kinds of rocks at that time. We plan our customer appreciation events. We review weekly real estate statistics and review the marketplace. I think doing all that stuff for your team helps your team be set up for success. And none of that actually translates directly to, how they're working in their business or how they're engaging their clients. But what it does is it gives them the preparedness and the information to go to their clients and then be their best self when they're there, because we talked about stats this week, or their buyer's pack is honed in tight because we weeded out all the stuff from the short sales and we've put all the stuff in for a seller's market, or, and so we've done all these little fine tunings of the business systems along the way. And then everybody is prepared when it's time to show up in front of the client. And then again, as long as the people that are working for me are happy, I'm happy. And I learned a long time ago that isn't tied to money and it isn't tied to production. And, if the people who are walking in the door every day have a smile on their face and they're happy to be here doing what they're doing, everything in the office is smoother, nicer, and easier to deal with. And so I just don't think that setting these sort of rigorous goals works in the long run, because it doesn't create the family that you need to stay together for a long time.
I think that's phenomenal. So my next question, and I know you personally, so this is much easier for me to ask to you than maybe some others that I know more on the surface. You are incredibly authentic. And I think that in real estate, that's a need. You have to be authentic. You have to be your authentic self to really succeed to your highest levels. Now, with authenticity comes vulnerability, because you're putting yourself out there, your real self, and then people can judge it, people can respond to it, people can make fun. Have you ever felt like being vulnerable has backfired on you?
You just said real self, and I have small children at home, and we read the original classic Velveteen Rabbit in my house, which is how the rabbit ultimately became real. And he became real because he was loved. And it's such an interesting little tie back to life, which is that when you're your vulnerable self, people feel like you've given them a sincere piece of you. And I think that it would be fair to say that a lot of my success has come from the fact that I feel like my clients love us. And they feel like when I come there and I give my authentic self to them, that comes across very sincerely. I truly believe that when I'm at somebody's kitchen table, I come across in a sincere way, professional, but sincere. And I think, well, you're right. When you give somebody your authentic or your vulnerable self, they in turn will give that back to you. And actually in a business deal as personal as real estate, because you're selling usually somebody's biggest or most prized asset, when they feel like you actually care about the process. That's an old John C. Maxwell quote, right? Like, I don't care how much you know until I know how much you care. Realizing that this is the most important thing going on in people's lives. And I say that to them in the meeting. I realize that you selling your house right now is the most important thing going on in your life, and it's important for me too. And I think you're right. Those kinds of authentic opportunities present themselves in my initial consultation and my presentation, and then it allows the relationship to be very open and flowing and communicative, and all of the other things that you need to have trust and have a positive working relationship. And I do that with everybody I do business with. And so I bring a consultation packet to people's houses. I sit down at their kitchen table and I tell them, this package is the foundation of the relationship we're about to embark on. And it is mandatory that we go through it together, because one, it gives you an opportunity to understand a little about me and my business. It also gives you an opportunity to tell me a little about yourself and your lives. And I think when you start from that personal platform, the business relationship can be really solid, or from that foundation, the business relationship can be really solid. And so I use the foundation sort of home building analogy in my relationship building with my clients, and it's working.
Good. So that question came from Matt Ritter. Matt was a 30 under 30 in 2005. Matt was my mentor. He's also my wife's cousin. So I know Matt really well. And I've said this to several people. I'll also say it to you. One of the reasons I'm doing this book is not only for my own personal development, but to be able to develop others. And I think that asking questions is a fantastic way of humbling yourself and saying, I know a lot, but I don't know everything. And so I want to interact with you and I want to ask you questions. And so as I'm sitting with each of these 30 under 30 recipients, I thought it would be really cool to ask them, what would you want to ask other people? And so I've curated a lot of the rest of these questions, and you see that in the list of questions in parentheses there, where all these questions come from. So that one was from Matt Ritter. And Matt's answer, very interestingly, just to exchange that with you, was that no, it's never backfired on him. And the reason for it is if it did backfire, it actually was a sign that there was a problem with that relationship.
Sure.
And he said, anytime that I've ever not been authentic, and I've shown that vulnerability in my authenticity and someone judges that, then it shows that there's a problem with that relationship.
Yeah. I mean, I think you've hit the nail on the head. And the initial answer for me was, I wrote the word no. No, people appreciate sincerity and being vulnerable. It allows a relationship of trust.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the answer is no. For people to be vulnerable, to be their authentic self is always the better way to be. Because what's the alternate? The alternate is to be your insincere self and and to be a roadblock and to be live with a wall up. Nobody wants to do business with people like that.
Right.
That's
people see it. It's very obvious.
Yeah.
So the next question comes from Rogers Healy in Dallas, Texas.
Yeah.
Rogers is, like a lot of people, wanting to know what your purpose is. What's your why? Why are you in real estate? Why do you come in after all the successes that you've had? Obviously, you've got kids. Why do you leave your kids every day? Why do you leave your husband every day to come into the office and work in real estate? Because some days it's not easy to do that. And so what is your purpose for being in this real estate industry?
It's funny. When I entered the business, I was 22 years old and I worked for my dad. And the second most important thing in my day was getting to the bar or getting to decorate my house or going out to dinner or. And I remember being asked the question about what my why was back then, or the reason why I got out of bed to do the business before I had my own family. And the natural answer was because of my dad. I'm a second generation realtor. My dad's been in the business. My dad is in so many ways similar to me and in so many ways different, but really highly disciplined, high D, high I, a great guy, a fun-loving, glass half full kind of guy. And when I was a kid in real estate, my why was my dad. And I think part of that was that as a child, you want to make your parents proud, and you want to do things that will make them happy and please them. I think children are always trying to please their parents. And then I got married and had my own kids, and my why has shifted, but it hasn't abandoned my dad and my parents. And my why has just, I think, gotten bigger, greater, and more purposeful. I often say that people without children will never get the true humbling experience of raising kids. And so I think everybody should have at least one kid if they ever get the chance, because it's something that will humble you in your business. So now my why, of course, is my kids, Evelyn, who's 5, and Nolan, who will be 3 in a month. And I have a 5-month-old at home, and I leave my 3 little kids at daycare, which is a costly endeavor, to, because I'm a social creature, truthfully. Motherhood's a little bit isolating, if I'm being honest. To sit at home with 3 kids would not align with my personality at all. And so if for no other reason, I'm doing it just to get out of the house, at this point, my kids are the most important thing going on in my life. And sure, I could or should be at home with my kids, or so society maybe says, but, and I would love that if all my friends would come to my house every day and I could be on the phone the entire time I was there with them, being this social creature, but that's just not the case. And maybe when my kids are bigger and they are more socially involved, or I can socially engage them differently, I'll have a different relationship with them than I do right now, which is a much more physical and caretaking style of relationship with my kids. But I'm a social person, and I love the thrill of the deal. Not the thrill of the chase necessarily. I don't like the lead generation piece of the business, but I love the relational piece of the deal of the business. And I truly have a love of my craft. I feel like I've spent my adult life honing my craft and becoming good at real estate, and I wasn't going to let, in spite of my love of my children, I wasn't going to let all of that hard work go to stay at home or do something different. So I wanted to stay in the business in some capacity while I was raising kids, and I thought I could do both, and I think I'm doing okay, but it's a hard juggle. I read a book this year from a woman named Teresa Taylor. She's become a mentor of mine, and she is the former COO of Quest, a 35,000 person company headquartered here in Denver. And she's a past client of my dad's, and I've been looking for a piece of property with her, and she's a neat lady. She gave me a book in my first meeting with her, and the book was titled The Balance Myth. And her philosophy is just basically that you can have it all, just maybe not right now. And you can have it all as long as you're present wherever you're at. So I'm here doing this chat with you. I'm present with you, right? Like, I'm here. I'm in a meeting with my assistant. I'm present with her. I'm doing Legos at home with my 5-year-old. I'm present with her, right? And so for me, I'm trying to just learn or hone the craft of presence. And that is my one word, my John Gordon one word for the year Dwayne got us set on was presence. So my one word for the year is presence. So I'm working on that, which is to be present wherever I'm at. And then Teresa Taylor, of course, taught me that you can't be everything to all people all the time. And if you want to achieve it all, you can. You just can't do it all at the same time.
So you're answering one of my later questions, which is how you fit it all in. And that comes from Greg Pekarsky. Greg is in Chicago. He was part of my 30 under 30 class in 2012. And we were down at that Howells and Hood restaurant where we had the reunion. But this was this last summer. So I drove out there on a family trip. We were doing a road trip. And I said to Courtney, we're going to be going through near Chicago. Can I get together and get a couple of 30 under 30s together for lunch? Yeah. So Rob Reuter hosted. Greg was there, and there were probably 6 others. Okay. We're in this big round table. Greg's at the furthest end of the table, and he kind of screams at me across the noise of the restaurant. He says, "Hey, Kyle, how do you fit it all in?" I said, "What do you mean?" And he goes, "Well," he's like, "All right, you're married. You've got kids. You've obviously got a busy business. You're doing this podcast. Now you're writing this book. Right. You do our conference calls. How do you fit it all in?" Yeah. So you started to touch on that, but I would say for you, how do you fit it all in? And I think being present is one of those ways. But how do you find the time to fit it all in? You're busy. You've got 3 little kids, and you're their caretaker. You've got a husband who obviously has needs. You've got business, business needs, people that need you in your business. How do you fit it all in?
We talked earlier about the art of delegation, and so that's part of it. And then asking for help and just being afraid not to ask for help. I didn't have a lot of help when I first got in the business. And the first piece of help I asked for was an assistant here at the office. If you're just starting in the business, the first piece of help you need in your business is just really an errand runner. And that can be a high school person, somebody who can come to your office in the afternoon, pick up your lockbox, maybe your sold writer, and an earnest money check that needs delivered or whatever, and get that person out on the road at 3 p.m. to go run some errands for you, and stop taking time doing those sorts of little menial, kind of mindless $10 an hour tasks. The second place you're going to ask for help is to get an assistant who can do things like your books, who can do things like your marketing, who can do things like your transaction coordination and your listing coordination and your filing and all of the other nuances of the business. And the third place I asked for help was at my house. So I hired a cleaning lady to come and just clean my house every other week. When I had the third baby, I actually stepped that personal help up even more, which was that if I wanted to continue to see the kind of success in my business that I wanted, I knew I couldn't be doing my own $10 and $15 an hour tasks at home. And I was finding myself doing things like laundry and dishes and floors. And at some point in my life, I said, I'm better than this. I'm more than this. I don't want to do my own laundry. There's got to be a solution. And so I asked the person who was cleaning for me if she'd be willing to come every other week and do my light housework things for me. And she's agreed. And so at some point after I had the third baby, I've got help changing sheets at home, doing beds, doing laundry, doing dishes, picking up toys, and doing other sort of light housework things. And what it has allowed me to do is to be my best self with my kids at home. Because when I was walking in the door, my hair was on fire and I was hollering and hooting and screaming and get your jacket hung up and put the toys away and I'm doing dishes and can't you see I'm busy here? And so I wasn't being my best self with my kids. And then I would get to the office and I would be frazzled because I didn't have time either to get ready for my day at home in the morning or whatever else was going on. And they were all bleeding together. And so my personal life and my business life was suffering. And the quicker you can start to ask for help and find those places where you're either doing things you don't like doing or doing things that are just bogging you down or not making you your best self. And then from there, asking for help from people that actually want to help you. People will often say, like, is there anything I can do to help you? And we always go, oh, thanks. No, you're so kind. Because in the back of your mind, you're thinking, everybody's busy. Everybody has a busy life. And everybody is busy to their busy potential, by the way. So, and I always say, if you want something done, give it to a busy person. And I find that that's why I'm able to sort of do more volume is because the busier I am, the more that sort of folds over on itself. And so the more it folds over on itself, the more I discover the things I don't like doing in that busyness. And so then I'm learning to master the art of delegation and getting rid of those things. And so I'm fitting it all in by asking for help. And that's really the thrust of the answer.
I love it. I completely agree.
And being organized. Yeah.
Go ahead with being organized. I'm sorry, I interrupted you there.
It goes back to my other statement, which is to get out the door, to get to the closing, to get to the deal, you have to be organized in some way.
Yeah. And you had, as you were talking through that and you're talking about, especially with your home life and hiring folks to clean your house, help with some of the things that you just have to do, but it's not your calling in life. I think that the idea that, and you had mentioned that some of these things you're clearly just better at doing than others. I think that some of it too is also allowing other people to show their gifts. And I think that instead of looking at it in such a way and this is for all of us, because I felt that way. I'm like, gosh, I'm a really good real estate agent. Why am I sitting at the auto repair shop getting my oil changed right now? It doesn't make sense. But I have to do it. And obviously it's something you need to do. And so what it is it's allowing someone else to help you. And I love how you tied that perfectly in. It's humbling yourself and saying, I literally cannot do it all, but the things that I will do are the things that I'm very good at. And the other things I'll allow other people to help me with. And I think it's wonderful. So that question came from Greg Pekarsky. The other question that I just love in this whole process is—
Before you leave that,
yes.
I have a cousin in town today. I had breakfast with her this morning, and she has 5 grown kids now. And she and her husband live in Chicago, busy attorneys, 2 attorneys. They raised 5 kids. And I asked her that question today. How did you fit it all in? We just had this conversation this morning. And she said, at some point, I realized that when the people that were coming to help me in my life were doing their calling and I was paying them for it, I was helping to reward them to be their best selves too. And she said, at some point I realized that when Donna came to clean, she did it with such pride and such joy. And she was so happy to be there doing it.
Yeah.
And then I rewarded her with payment that I actually was helping her in her life achieve her goals too. And so not always like looking at the help as help, but looking at the help as a way to help others.
Absolutely.
And so I just hadn't thought of it that way. And she mentioned that this morning.
There's a famous author that wrote he's a Jewish rabbi. His name's Rabbi Daniel Lapin. And he wrote a book called Thou Shalt Prosper. And one of the concepts in the book is that when you're paid by a client, they are giving you certificates of appreciation with dead presidents' faces on them. And if you realize that when someone hands you money, they're saying thank you with their money, with their wallet. And you're doing that, our clients are doing that for us. It's really, really cool to be a part of the economy. So I love her answer. I love your cousin's answer.
Yeah.
So Koki Adasi out of Washington, D.C., you were at the 30 Under 30 reunion in 2015. So you heard him do this presentation, but he always wants people to know how they set their day up, what their ideal day looks like. If you could perfectly script your day, what would that look like? And do you time block intentionally? How do you handle that?
Yeah. Not my personality style. I just never really became successful at doing it. But what I will tell you I do is I carry a plan. It looks like this. It's got the date at the top, and it's all the activities I need to do for the day. And at the top of the list actually are my past client calls. So the very first thing I prioritize in my day is calling Jamie on his birthday, calling Tracy on her birthday, calling Kurt on his birthday, calling Ava on her birthday, and checking in with Russ and Dixie on their wedding anniversary. I obviously don't have it in the system, so I made myself a note to do that today. The next thing here is scheduled appointments, right? So my meeting with Kyle, doing final walkthrough, going to closings, getting to an ongoing meeting, and taking my kid to gymnastics. All of that is time blocked into my day today. And so my assistant, I actually prepared this the night before. It syncs with my assistant's file. She prints it, puts it on my desk first thing in the morning. It's at the top of my pile every day. And so when I get into the office, the very first thing I do is actually print my plan, and then I start working the plan. And the other thing that's on here, that's the next pages behind the tasks, is actually the to-dos. So today's an inspection objection deadline, or today's an insurance deadline for a client, or today's some other contract task basically that I need to do in my business. And so I'm sort of watching all of those things and sort of navigating that as I launch action plans towards every transaction side or every listing side that I'm doing. So those things actually automatically show up in the schedule when they're due. And then, so I'm planning my day in advance. So I'm a night owl, so I'd rather sit up at between 9 and 10 p.m. actually and plan my day for the next day than get up early. But I think you can do it in either event. My dad is a morning person, so he'd get up and do his daily planning between 5 and 6 a.m. So I would do mine between 9 and 10 p.m. and he does his between 5 and 6 a.m. But we get to the same result, which is that first thing in the morning, once the phone starts ringing, you've got your plan in place. And if with a plan, like this, what's the old adage? I don't even know whose adage this is. If you don't have a plan, you can plan to fail. And so we knew that we needed to put a plan in place. And then I just work the plan every day, basically. Anything that doesn't get done today, I roll it on my plan for tomorrow. And then I keep working at it. And then, of course, things that have deadlines, they become important to urgent. And I try not to work in an urgent matter to the extent that I can. I try and get all the important stuff done today so that nothing is urgent tomorrow.
I love that.
Yeah.
So the next question I have is a question that I came up with all on my own. And it's part of this process of talking to people that have received a wonderful honor under the age of 30 years old, but now they're in their mid-30s or they're in their 40s. And what I find myself having the opportunity to do is I've had a couple of people reach out to me that are 2017 hopefuls of the 30 under 30 application process. And they say, hey, what would you do differently? Or what would you, what do you suggest for me? And it's neat being the mentor at times. And so my question is, dear younger me, if you're writing a letter to yourself when you started in the business in your early 20s, what might you do differently now? Or what type of advice would you give yourself at that time that now that you've got some of the battle scars,
Sure.
What advice would you give to yourself?
When I was 22 and I got into business, I didn't think my dad knew anything about anything.
Magically, now he knows everything about everything.
About everything. And I think that, there is something to be said for people who've lived a full life. And I'm not talking about even successful people in real estate. I'm talking about people who have lived a full life. They just have encountered more living. And I can tell you, when I look back on who I was when I got into the business, my ego was huge. And I think I have been so humbled by a little bit of living. And I think that must continue. I know it must continue because you hear people say by 50, people who are 50 say they think they really have it figured out. But I look at my dad as he sits 70. My dad's actually been sort of re-humbled, right? Which I think by the time you get to 45 to 55, you're probably in the, what I would consider maybe the peak of life, which is that you've done enough living and you've probably actually raised your kids. And you can be humbled and have so much gratitude and learn, you know, these other attributes of living, like being present when your kids are little and all this other stuff that sort of surrounds itself into being a good human and a successful person. And so my younger version of myself, I would say to really try to listen to the people who are around you, who have good advice to give you. And maybe you just sift through it like an old sifter, like a flour sifter. You take what you want and you bag the rest. And I think we're always constantly putting advice through those funnels. A couple of takeaways from my adolescence was that my sister-in-law, who was 10 years older than me, said, I don't always want your advice. So when you're ready to give it, you should ask for permission first. And so I catch myself saying things like, do you want my advice? Or asking for permission to give advice, because I'm a pretty direct person. And so as a direct person, I found myself saying, would you like my advice? Do you want my advice? Do you want to hear what I think about that? Before just like soliciting it, giving advice unsolicited.
Yeah.
Let me look here because I had some other notes on my younger self. When I got into the business, there was a guy named Les Fenning, and he was a veteran real estate broker in my office. And Les came down to my office and sat in my chair in my office and said, if I can offer you one piece of advice, my advice would be to buy a piece of real estate for every year that you're in the business. And so I've done that. There were definitely years I stuck my neck out to buy a piece of real estate in the business, but the opportunities always presented themselves. I just had to have my eyes open to see it. And so, you know, a little townhouse, a little 2-bed, 2-bath, 2-car garage townhouse would come across my desk, and it would be a perfect rental property. And instead of letting it go or letting it be fleeting, I would figure out the challenge of finding the money, finding the finances, finding the uncomfortable conversation to have maybe with my seller to say, instead of marketing this for you, can I buy it? And sort of navigating what could sometimes be an uncomfortable shift in your relationship with somebody you've built this trust up with. So the only years I didn't buy a piece of real estate were the years in which I had a baby, except for 2016.
Smart decision.
Bought a house and had a baby in 2016. It starts to fold over on itself. And so the more rental properties I have acquired, the more wealth I have acquired, the more flexibility it has given me to spend time doing the things I want to do. And effectively, I mean, Les's advice was, if you buy a piece of real estate every year that you're in the business, you can retire at 40 rich. And he's right. That, you know, I think by the time I get to 40, I could probably be in a spot where I could actually sit back and decide if I really wanted to continue to work or not. I think ultimately that doesn't fit with my personality and my life. And so I'll probably keep working. But I certainly set myself up financially in a position by working hard in my real estate business and acquiring some real estate along the way to retire at 40 rich if I want to.
Awesome. 2 more quick questions for you, and then I think we'll be done with our time, because I know you've got a full schedule after this. And this comes from the guys in Washington, D.C., Brandon Green and Bo Mankitti. They're Keller Williams Capital Properties. And their question is, what's the one thing that everyone must discover in their real estate career?
Well, I think that you have to figure out what the single most important task is that you're doing every day, and then master it.
Sure.
I learned a long time ago that real estate is actually about understanding the value of a piece of real estate. So I discovered early in my career that I needed to be an expert at doing a market analysis and telling people what a house was worth. Like, there's a lot to real estate because you're a jack of all trade, a master of basically none. You have to be a little bit of marketing and a little bit of finance and a little bit of entrepreneur and a little bit of social and a little bit of organization and a little bit of this and a little bit of that. But ultimately, my success hinged on being able to tell people what a house was worth. And so when I decided that I was going to know what every piece of real estate I encountered was truly worth, everything else became easy because I was finding success selling things because I wasn't pricing them wrong. And then I was getting paid. And it was a magical thing because then I could become organized and hire help and do all the other things that really are ancillary. So we get lost in the noise of the business And as long as you can focus in on what you think is the most important thing in your business, then I think you can discover your true potential, or the business will then overlay itself.
Yeah, you've actually, with your answer, helped me out with the structure of this book. So I'm going to say thank you now, and then I'll say thank you later in the book, because one of the bigger things I've been struggling with is writing. It's not easy. It's really, really difficult. And we've all read some books that weren't written well. We've read some books that are written really, really well, but are hard to read because they're like a textbook. And then you read that book that just relates, and you're like, that was so easy. I loved it. I want to read it again. And so I've been struggling for the last year the interviewing part is really easy for me. I love communicating with others, and I really love to just pick each person's brain and just understand what makes them tick. So that's the easy part for me. It's the distilling that down and then sharing it. And in the way that you discuss the obvious, which is in real estate, we are all self-employed small business owners. And what that means is that you're a chief everything officer. You're doing everything, but none of it really, really well. And so I think figuring out where that one spot in the industry is your expertise, and then hiring around it, delegating, it's huge. I love it. Yeah. So final question, and this comes from Sasha Farmer out of Charlottesville, Virginia. Sasha's a gifted speaker, and she travels all over the country. She was also part of my 30 under 30 class. She wants to know what the most memorable or impactful experience that you've had during your real estate career.
I'm glad you gave me the questions in advance, so I had a chance to think on this, because it was actually greater than just the art of the deal, right? Because one of the things I learned when I had a baby was that I wasn't going to remember which real estate side I was working on that year if I wasn't present with my family, and so on and so forth. So I had a chance to sort of be able to sort of step back and say, okay, this question isn't about the art of the deal. It isn't about the art of the family dynamic. It isn't about the art of my business. It's about who made those impacts on me. And the most impactful person in my life was my dad, Big DAD.
Yeah.
Joe DiVito. I think there's going to be a time in my future where I'll look back and just be so thankful to him for everything he has done and given me. And the tears are really from a place of gratitude and appreciation and caring for him, and how much he has given of himself to us, to the team, to the group, to the business, to his career, to his clients. He is a master of the craft. And, I think the work that you're doing, Kyle, is really important, because somebody is going to look back on this work and they're going to feel like this about what you've given them. And it's huge. Mentorship is so huge, and you are doing it better than anybody right now. You are taking people under your wing, and you're giving them the gift of an opportunity, of a thought, of, a system, or whatever they need. And it's huge. It's going to resonate so huge. And you are making such an impact on somebody right now. And that's how I feel about my dad and the impact that he has made in our lives. He's a good man, and mentorship is so huge. So huge. So I'm sorry for the tears, but thank you.
No, don't apologize. That means that what I'm doing is meaningful. And at times I write. I'm like your dad. I'm an early bird by nature, and so a lot of times I write in the morning, and I'll wake up and I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do. And I think that if I continue to remind myself that it's about mentoring that person that feels lost, or feels like they don't have anybody else that has their back, feels like they need direction. Because we've all had that, right? I had that with Matt Ritter, and being able, I remember helping Matt with his 30 under 30 application. When I was 1 year out of college and I was working as his lead admin, I remember all of that. And Matt invested in me in ways that has multiplied throughout my career. And I haven't worked for him for 6 years now. I've left his company, and I've since, left Madison as well. So I like your answer to the question, because I think Sasha, in her question, she's thinking like, give me an event, give me an experience, give me a something. But I really think that it's a who question more so than a what question. And I really like that answer that you gave.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to give you the interview and again, slice up my authentic self for you here at the end.
Good. Well, thank you for your encouragement.
All right, buddy. I'll talk to you later.
All right. Bye, Amanda. Take care.
Bye.
Thanks.
You bet.